If there's a problem, like Devin thinks she's gonna have it. Like if there's a sickness, an illness, or whatever, she thinks she's gonna get it. She thinks she's gonna have it.
I Googled like signs and symptoms of diabetic. What do you know? That's what it tells you. And I convinced myself, I'm like, Hunter, I think I do have it. He still was like, no, you're just pregnant. She was like, your number was 321. And I was like, that sounds high. Woo! What's up, Cordle Fam?
Hey,
welcome back to the channel. So it has been almost a week that I've been fasting, and it's been really good. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep it up because I keep thinking like my blood sugar is gonna give and be too low, but right now
it's been good.
It's been really good. So speaking of diabetes, I get this question asked a lot. And so I just was like, I need to talk about it. If it weren't for like my pregnancy, it could have been a lot worse, me finding out that I was diabetic. Looking back, now I'm like, those were signs and symptoms that I was diabetic. Let's debrief on that a little bit. Okay.
Number one.
So whenever I was 22, 23 weeks pregnant, Hunter and I went on our baby moon / anniversary trip. And this was the week that I was supposed to get, so maybe I was 24 weeks. Because this was the week I was supposed to get my blood sugar glucose test, but I pushed it back a week because we were going to be gone. On this trip, I kept telling people, I was like, I feel like I'm going to be diabetic. So I just want to give myself a week. Like I didn't want to find out that I had gestational diabetes and then go on our trip because I love food, and that was what we revolve our trip around, is where we're gonna eat.
I was just like, whatever. Talking about, you said, I feel like I'm gonna be diabetic because like if there's a problem, like Devin thinks she's gonna have it. Like if there's a sickness, an illness, or whatever, she thinks she's gonna get it. She thinks she's gonna have it. That kind of thing. So I'm like, whatever.
I don't know why I thought that. I pushed my test back, my glucose test, and we went to Gatlinburg and we had a great time. We ate a lot, ate at all my favorite places, because in my mind, which I do not advise this, like knowing that I was going, I'm like, I just want to eat whatever I want in case I have gestational diabetes and then I can't eat anything. That was not wise on my part, because something bad could have happened on that trip. So on that trip, we ate so much. I didn't read about the signs and symptoms of having diabetes prior to this. I just was waiting for that test. I was so thirsty, and I was craving specifically Gatorades with the twisty cap. So if that tells you anything, those are full of sugar. So I was trying to quench my thirst.
I don't think the entire time that we have been married, still to this point, I've ever seen you drink as many Gatorades as you drank in those like 4 days.
Oh, I know. We had to buy them every day and multiple. Like the twisty cap ones. Like I remember drinking 3 a day. 3 in one day at one time, because I was so thirsty and I just couldn't. It was just like this dryness in my mouth, and if you've ever been that thirsty, it's just something unexplainable. Like it kind of just makes me like want to drink water right now.
And then we were at a restaurant.
Yes, we were at a restaurant.
And Devin kept getting water. You got like 8 refills of water. Like before we ever got our food. I'm not talking about the whole time. Before we got our food, she was just like drinking the whole glass. So the waitress literally brought her a dang pitcher.
A pitcher. Just to sit on the table. And I drank it all. I drank so much water, and it still didn't do anything. And I told her, I'm like, why am I so thirsty? That same trip, do you remember we were like driving towards like downtown Gatlinburg, and I was like, my vision's really blurry. I was like squinting and stuff. I had my contacts in, and it was just blurry. So that is another sign.
And you had to pee a lot.
Yes, but I was pregnant, so I just wrote that off, and I was drinking a lot of water, Gatorade, so I was like, well, that's why I'm using the bathroom. But it was because your blood sugar was high. Very high. But I don't even know how high it was.
There's no telling.
Like, I just thank God that I didn't go into DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis, which is very like life-threatening. A lot of people actually go into DKA. Like, that's how they find out they're diabetic. God was looking out for us, because that was scary. Blurry vision, excessive thirst, extreme fatigue. But again,
which is hard because I was gonna say it's hard to notice half of those symptoms because you say like,
it's because I'm pregnant,
over halfway through your pregnancy.
And that's also like pregnancy symptoms: excessive urination, tiredness. So the only thing that really stood out to me was the blurry vision, and that's when I was like, So after experiencing all that, I Googled like signs and symptoms of diabetic. What do you know? That's what it tells you. And then I convinced myself, I'm like, Hunter, I think I do have it. He still was like, no, you're just pregnant, like whatever. So flash forward to the next week, I get home, I drink the glucose test. I actually enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like too sugary or it tasted good to me, which might have been like red flag. So I went and I was waiting in the waiting room, and this was the 1 hour test. Started feeling the same symptoms, extreme like tiredness. I was feeling nauseous at that point. And so I Googled it again just to confirm. And I remember screenshotting this to you and sending it. And I was like, there's no way that I don't have gestational diabetes because I have every single one of these. And at that point you were just like, okay, you know, I get, were you kind of thinking it at that point too?
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I never would have thought that you would have like kept it, you know, because gestational diabetes like really isn't that like uncommon, you know? So I was just like, oh, it's fine. Like you'll just have it for now and like you'll be all right. Like I was thinking like it'll be diet controlled. Never did I think you would have to be taking insulin and then you would end up with type 1 after.
So let's get there. Okay.
Sorry.
Let's get there.
I jumped the gun.
You know, you always hear if you don't hear from your doctor, that means you're in the clear. But if you get a call, that's enough.
Get a call.
So the next day, I remember I was sitting on the floor doing something and I just felt this like, I was like, I'm gonna get a call. Like, there's no way I'm not. And then it was right before closing time. The doctor's office closed. What's crazy is, do you remember at our old church, one of the pastors had left me a voicemail saying that they were like, hey, just want to let y'all know y'all are on our hearts and we're just praying for you, whatever. I was listening to that voicemail and then I get a call and so the timing of that was crazy too. So it was like I kind of felt a little bit of peace and then they called me and so I knew. I was like, hello. She sounded really worried, and typically when people, you know, they'll just call you like, hey, you failed your 1 hour, you need to take a 3 hour test. So that's what I was expecting, but she was like, did you like not fast before you came in to your test? I was like, no. I was like, I fasted. And she was like, okay. She was like, well, your blood sugar, she was like, was really, really high. I was so uneducated at this point. I didn't know what to ask or ask. I didn't even think to ask what my number was. I didn't even know what you failed by. I was just like, okay. And I started crying on the phone because it just like worried me. And then I was like, that's why I was feeling that way in Gatlinburg and all this.
I feel like every time you had like some kind of information given to you like that, I was at work.
Yes, maybe like, that's what it was.
Almost every time. Because like when you went and they told you like how bad it was and that I was at work. Like every time I was at work.
Okay. So that was that. So I think you were at work.
Which I was working a lot.
Because I was by myself. I was like, what do I do? And she just was like, it's too high. Like you don't even need to take 3 hour tests. Like we are referring you
like you got
immediately.
F.
Yeah, we are referring you immediately to an endocrinologist. And I was just like, what? And those words just sounded so big. I had no idea what the endocrinologist was for, you know?
Unless you're just like in the field.
Just
like
uneducated.
You don't know about that kind of stuff unless you deal with it or like a close like relative deals.
I don't remember the series in between, but I think I did go to a follow-up before they sent me to endocrinologist. At that point I had Googled what do you fail by, and it said like you fail if it's 140, past 140. Normal range for blood sugar is
70 to 140.
Yeah. She was like, your number was 321. And I was like, that sounds high.
Yeah.
And now I know that how high that really is.
Yeah.
You know, but then I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so off from 140.
Yeah.
You know? Went to the endocrinologist. They looked at all my blood work.
This was during COVID too, so I couldn't have went with you anyway.
Yeah, he couldn't go. She was like, you were probably pre-diabetic. And that just was like destroying news, you know? Like nobody wants to hear that. And then, cause I'm thinking, I'm like, so now my whole pregnancy, I've gone with diabetes, haven't taken care of it. Is Ivy going to be okay? They told me, you know, like risk factors with having gestational diabetes, they have to do that, whatever. Obviously she was like, you don't have to worry, like we're going to get under control, whatever. Still at that point, completely uneducated. I joined Facebook groups for pregnancy, like gestational diabetes. They didn't put me on insulin right away. They wanted me to see if I was diet controlled. I obviously wasn't. That was discouraging. My doctor was he was basically saying most women with gestational diabetes, you know, there's a 50-50 shot. Like typically, as soon as you deliver your placenta, your diabetes goes away. Very rare does it stick unless you're diabetic. People that do have gestational diabetes, I think, have like they're more likely to develop type 2 down the road, whatever. So they were still thinking I was probably going to be type 2. once I had Ivy, which was still so peculiar because your typical type 2 diabetic I didn't look like or have, I don't know.
And we've always we've always ate pretty healthy, we've always taken care of ourselves, worked out, blah, blah, blah.
So after I had Ivy, it just didn't go away, and then that's when my whole journey.
Which they were trying to say that you were type 2 for a while.
And I was just like, there is no way. I was checking my blood sugar, and
because they weren't prescribing you insulin.
Yes.
They were prescribing her metformin, which is a pill, and it wasn't working.
I was
your blood sugar was still crazy.
And looking back at pictures last year, I was so skinny.
Yeah.
My face was just sunken in. I have natural dark circles, but I just was looked like a hollow person. And so I was losing weight, and that's a big sign of type 1 diabetes is I was eating whatever I wanted in some ways because I was it's not working, and I was getting so discouraged, but I was losing weight.
And you weren't really even working out.
No, I didn't work out, and I was at my smallest. I was smaller than I was pre-pregnancy. That's when we made a YouTube video a few months ago.
Yeah.
So when we picked back up in November-ish, that's when they finally diagnosed me as type 1 diabetic and put me back on insulin, because I was on insulin whenever I was pregnant. After they saw the diet wasn't working, they did put me on insulin.
So now, looking back, before you were pregnant, do you think that you were diabetic?
Yeah.
Undiagnosed, or at least pre-diabetic, I guess
Probably,
they call it.
Yeah, I guess pre, because even now, whenever I get my highs,
you remember
I feel worse now. Do you remember we would always go eat a big meal on a Sunday? And I know people were like, oh, I need to take a nap after that, but I would pass out.
Oh, yeah.
Tired. I couldn't keep my eyes open.
And we had this tradition of eating ice cream on Sunday afternoons, and Devin would just pass out.
Yeah.
After, which is funny that we never realized it.
I know.
Because
y'all always just made fun of me in a funny way.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Devin taking her.
She's
her
she's
nap.
out. Yes, you were napping, but you would just be gone for 2 hours. Not move, nothing.
Yeah.
You're out for the count for 2 hours.
And that's a bit, so that's another sign of just diabetes in general is tiredness. If your blood sugar's high, I experience blurry vision, extreme tiredness, excessive thirst, frequent urination. I remember last year I was sick all the time.
Yeah.
So I always thought I had the stomach bug, but really I was probably entering into DKA, which is scary to think about. Even my friends now, they were yeah, I remember you'd eat a cookie and you were gone. It was almost a label. Y'all just I was labeled as just a girl that naps a lot. Yeah. But really it's because I was sick.
Which you were. But thinking about it, you were always like that, even when we were teenagers. When we would do things with my family or whatever and hang out, you were always just asleep, just all the time.
I know.
Passed out.
In the middle of conversations, I was just I just couldn't even pay attention, keep my eyes open. I ate healthy for the most part. It was on the weekends whenever I would indulge.
Right.
And I worked out because I worked at a gym. That was my job. So I trained all the time. So I think that helped me stay balanced in a way. Whenever I went to doctor's appointments, they don't check you for that because it's not in my family either. So that was a big thing. Nobody would have thought that because nobody in my family has type 1 diabetes. You have experienced any of those, you probably, not you probably, but it's just good to get checked anyways. And we get asked a lot about Ivy, so that's a big concern for us if we're is Ivy going to get it?
And now we know the signs and stuff, so it's easier to keep an eye on it. This has been a couple months ago now, but one day Ivy had some ice cream and she was extra fussy, extra tired, after she had the ice cream, and I was eh? So we tried it again a few days later or whatever it was, and she was fine.
Yeah.
So I think it was just a coincidence, or just the sugar got to her.
We have to be her advocate, right? Because even though they know, I think they all would check her now because I'm type 1. So. We still will always be hey, will you check her?
Yeah.
So last thing is all the years, it's it was in my face the whole time. I remember having classmates that would have now I know what it is, the Omnipod they'd have on their arm. I was always so interested in these people that had diabetes.
You got one.
Well, not interested I want that, but it just was always. And then whenever I was a PTA and worked in a nursing home, it was all my patients I felt were always diabetic. Yeah. And then it would get me thinking. Just people I'd come in contact with were always diabetics. I was always drawn to these people.
That's just crazy. So it's weird to think back and when you were working at the nursing home, you weren't diabetic.
No.
You didn't have insulin then. You didn't, you know what I'm saying? It's weird to think back at the times that, because I think now we're like we're used to it, but we're not at the same time. It's weird to think back and that you were like okay without your stuff.
Yeah. But really, I was a zombie.
Well, yeah.
It's like you're used to how you feel. Right. And so now I feel like the best I've ever felt.
Yeah.
So anyways, there's the story, guys.
Yeah. Whoa. Way to end it on a terrible
listen to your body. You know, if those are signs and things, I mean, go get checked out. It's always good to stay educated on lots of things, but just to know your body. And if you're a type 1 or type 2 diabetic warrior, I love ya. We're in this together, brothers and sisters. But remember, we're not your doctors or healthcare providers, so go talk to your doctors and healthcare providers. This is just me and what's going on in my life. I hope you've enjoyed this video. We love y'all. Bye.
Bye.